What's up, YouTube? It's Crawday23 here, bringing you another episode of my modern ban list discussion type video thing. We'll come up with a better title later, but right now I really want to get into this card because it's a card I've kind of flip flopped on a lot actually when kind of writing up a mock script for this. And it's in a weird place, and I kind of want to talk about it because I think it's probably the most interesting card that is on the ban list that really has sparked a discussion, like an internal discussion with myself, that no card really has up to this point. So, without further ado, we're going to get into it. Green Sun Zenith is a sorcery spell that costs X and green, where you can search your library for a green creature card with converted mana cost X or less, put it onto the battlefield, shuffle your library, shuffle Green Sun Zenith into its owner's library. Whew. So, what exactly is like controversial about this card? Well, if this was like 2017, 2018, possibly even the early parts of 2019, I would have thought this card would have been fine. Truly. For the fact that it does get some pretty good green creatures. I know like Elves was a thing that people played in Modern, and it's been a pretty good deck. It's always been a consistently performing deck, and this would just be another way for them to like kind of develop their mana, develop their board, and everything like that, and it would scale into the late game. There were some really good green creatures that you could play where you could use Green Sun Zenith, but it really wouldn't be like super powerful, right? Like getting Knights of the Reliquary, or getting like Land of War Elves, or Elvish Mystics, and things like that, or getting Elvish Archdruids really isn't super powerful by modern standards back then, because we had decks like Hogak, we had Blue Red Phoenix, you even had some of the other Jund type decks, you had Dredge. There were other decks that were like kind of faster than Green Sun Zenith, and like Green Sun Zenith could like sort of kind of in a way like give some consistency to those green decks to like punish those decks if they didn't have their fast draws. But now in 2020, going into 2021, I think Green Sun Zenith should stay on the ban list for the time being, for the fact that we've have a very, 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 very big pool of really good green creatures that are pretty cheap and aggressively costed for their cost. Uro and Omnath, Locus of Creation, being the big ones to essentially take away from this. If there's going to be any that I bring up, it's going to be those two. Mainly because Green Sun, like 4 mana to get an Uro into the graveyard, and while Green Sun doesn't essentially fuel the Uro, realistically, like just playing through the game naturally with there being fetch lands and the type of decks that are playing Uro and Omnath in the same deck, Green Sun Zenith just does a lot for you. It can go get your mana accelerating creatures like your Azusas and your Dryad of the Elysian Groves, and have you play extra lands. You know, it give you something to do with that extra mana. Getting just to go get Uros and put it into the graveyard while also getting to draw a card, gain 3 life, and ramp you some more. Getting an Omnath just lets you draw a card, and then if you have yet to play a land for the turn, then it just puts an Omnath into play, and then you essentially just get to create a ton of more mana if you have a fetch land, and other ways to just play more lands, which more than likely you will with, again, having Dryads and Azusas and whatnot. Just those two creatures in general just give Green Sun a lot of good targets. It gives Green Sun a lot of utility, because even if Green Sun essentially cycles by going and getting another Uro, that's still fueling other Uros that are in the graveyard, and it puts itself back in the deck, and you just get to draw a card off of it. You know, that's great. And then again, putting more lands into play that synergize well with Omnath and some of the other cards like Field of the Dead, where you could just essentially make a ton of zombies. And Green Sun, while not necessarily enabling all of it, does give it a lot more consistency in a format that right now went from being like winning the game on turn 3 or turn 4, sometimes even turn 2 if you were lucky, to now just being a lot grindier with Stoneforge Mystics and other different counter spells and other different grindy decks that are out there in the format. And Green Sun would just give those green decks a lot of play to them. And while it is restrictive to only getting green creatures, there's a lot of really good green creatures that are just played in the format. Like even Green Sun Zenith getting like a Tarmogoyf, like a 5/6 Tarmogoyf for 3 mana, that's just really good. That's just a lot of really good value in formats where this card is just always going to be good. Like, unless you are just severely behind and an Omnath is not going to get you back into it, or an Uro is not going to get you back into it, This card is just always going to be good. It's always going to scale to the late game. It's always going to be good in the early game as well if you play cards like Dryad Arbor, which are kind of free when you're a base green deck, just to get some ramp in, like set you up for your turn 2 Uros and things like that, or turn 2 Azusas and the whatnot. And this card is just really good, and it's a card that I think a few years ago could have been unbanned, but now just it has to stay on the ban list. There's no way that this thing could come off the ban list, and it's unfortunate because while I would love to play with this card, I also like healthy formats, and this would not push the format in a healthy direction. It would push it into a very unhealthy direction, which is kind of weird to say about mid-range decks, but when decks today like are labeled mid-range decks, but really they just race to the late game, and the late game has become the mid game and whatever. It's this card just can't exist unfortunately in that format. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below of this video. If you think Green Sun would be totally fine, if you agree with me that it's just too good, what has to be done to make this card playable in Modern, or rather be able to be unbanned and survive a future banning in the Modern format. Let me know in the comments of this video. And that's going to be it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in the next video.